My name is Danielle Logan. I'm an instructor here at Visa. I'd like to thank Wendy Welch, our director, for giving me the honor of welcoming you all here tonight, and welcoming Etienne Zack here. We're very excited to have him here to give a talk this evening. But on to the important part of the evening. I have the pleasure of introducing Etienne. Etienne was born in Montreal. I met Etienne actually at Emily Carr in 96 or 97, I think, when we started. Etienne graduated in 2000 from Emily Carr. Was at Concordia for a little bit before that, studying painting. And since then, there are probably, I don't think there's a person in the room that doesn't have some inkling of what Etienne has been up to. Etienne has a show that actually is just closing today, or just closed today, in Vancouver at Equinox Gallery, which was in itself. And Etienne also has a show that is going to be in a show called O Canada, which I'm sure you've all seen the cover of Canadian Art for the spring-summer. And that exhibition opens on the 27th of May at the Masnoka. Etienne has exhibited extensively across Canada, the United States, and in Europe. He has a show coming up in Ireland later this year.
Yeah.
Yes? Later. I looked it all up today, but you know, when the moment comes, trying to remember all the dates. Etienne has had numerous solo shows at his gallery in Vancouver, Equinox Gallery, or the gallery that represents him. He has also been, just let me see here so I don't forget them, I wrote them all down in case this happened. In 2001, so last year, he had a solo exhibition at the Torrance Art Museum in California. And in 2010, some of you may have seen his work if you were over to Vancouver for the Olympics, because he was part of the Cultural Olympiad there. And as well as that, it was a busy year in 2010. A number of you, I think, probably heard about Etienne's solo show at the Musée d'Art Contemporain in Montreal. And there's fabulous, one quick little Google and you will find many, many glowing reviews of that exhibition at the Musée Contemporain. So the list goes on, so please forgive me, Etienne, for not going through them all because it's so impressive, and we are really delighted to have you here tonight, and so I will take less time and give more to you because that's why we're all here. So please join me in a round of applause.
Well, thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Wendy, for having me here. Thanks to everybody for coming. Let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough. So I wanted to start with really early work, early-ish, 2001, 2002. This is a painting I made when I finished school, and I was kind of, I was interested in walking around the city in Vancouver and thinking about the landscape and thinking about my education that I got going to Emily Carr and Vancouver as and part of my education was very much kind of focused on looking at photography and the history of the photographic history of Vancouver. And so I started to make these paintings that were kind of, they had to do with conceptually, like the devices of photoconceptualism, but putting them into painting. So I was kind of interested in looking at photography. I was interested in looking at painting through photography. So photography that looks at painting and then looking at the photography of the painting, which here's a good example is Jeff Wall's photograph, A Sudden Gust of Wind in '93, and this is Hokusai's woodcut. So this kind of translation of mediums and playing around with that. And so with this painting, what I was interested in doing is so all my work, even what I do now, is I don't use source material. I just use what I know, what I remember, and how I remember it too. So I'm myself very much a medium itself, like a kind of technology, just like using a photo for a reference. Burrard Street, and I just imagined a fictional event, a fictional sculpture that could be erected in the middle of this plaza. So in a way, this painting becomes the only document of this event happening. So kind of trying to think about painting as stretching kind of what you can use painting for. And this is a recurring thing in my work, where there's conceptual aspects, but it's always through material. I look at painting itself too. So here's another one with digging, and digging was, I made a few paintings about digging, and then it just came back recently in my work. But it's been there in many ways. I'm going to keep going forward. But so this is a place where there was a jewelry store, and it just I guess I was really poor at that time, and kind of like let's go get it. And so it's like this fictional event that I stage, and staging is something that I've been interested in. What I've done for this talk, which I've never done before, I'm just kind of putting it together. So just maybe bear with me. It's still going to be it should be okay. But so I've put images. I don't use source material, but I had fun doing, like, researching source material for this talk. So I decided to put all this together. So archaeological digs, and what I've been doing here, which I'll come back to these digs. The reason why I took this picture is because I'm doing actual paintings of archaeological digs at the moment. But here's another form of digging. 15th century woodcut. There's beautiful woodcuts of that time of sort of precursor of diagnosis and the finding out this sort of idea of forensics is something that comes back in my work too. So, I mean, I gathered some images about that. Caravaggio. I was interested in this painting because also throughout the history of Christianity, the idea of the body, the representation of the body, is something that I was interested in this is Rembrandt. Got the titles, the Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicholas Toth, 1632. And so, again, this digging, this painting was part of the museum show I had at Musée d'Art Contemporain. And so I made this painting thinking about digging through a head, but digging through a history of a head and a history of representation. And so it starts with fairly representational, realistic hair on the top right corner, and it goes down and disintegrates into different technologies to come down to this kind of abstract scraping in the middle with this kind of peg, almost like there was an animal tied to the peg and eating away. And this, I kind of made this talk to kind of give you an idea of how I think about making the work, and I based it on 3 paintings that are early paintings. So the first one I showed you with the hole, and another one that's coming up. And so again, like talking about technology and representation and the idea of forensics is something that with this painting, this one is part of the show at Equinox Gallery, and I should tell you the dates because everything is not in chronological. I didn't want to do a talk that's chronological, but more by themes in my work. And so this painting is 2011, so it's in the show at Equinox right now. And I wanted to make a fictional scene that something happened, and there's two microscopic slides, two sort of windows in the middle of the painting that are illuminated by these fluorescent bulbs. Very rudimentary kind of setup. And then from that, this kind of lifting up of these molecules and this kind of system of representation that we're familiar with now, and almost kind of forming a face or a skull, and the debris around that scene is forms taken from a lot of supremacists and the Russian constructivist kind of shapes. So shapes that come from the early 20th century in Russia, when there was a system changing and artists were playing around with shapes, with language, and thinking about possibilities. And possibilities is very much something that I'm interested in the paintings, is that there's possibilities with the materials, with the way things are organized. Just like the first painting, that hole I dug in the ground is a suggestion, it's a possibility. So a lot of the work suggests or propose an idea. So this is another early work, 2001, and it had to do with, the background was an image that I saw in the newspaper. It was during the Iraq War, and that shape on top is loosely taken from a ExhibitVic sculpture that I had seen in New York. And the idea with this was to just kind of stop an image, to obstruct an image. And it's something, again, that comes up in my work, whereas things are okay, but then there's also other elements that come into play and come and disrupt the image. And so I guess at that time I was probably reading some things about the Situationist International, these kinds of ideas about sort of putting a stick in kind of the capitalist wheel and kind of stop this program we're being proposed. And so I was thinking about painting in that way too, and suggesting counterpoints within the same image, counter arguments or conflicting zones. And I very much work that way, where ideas come from everywhere, and they slowly, it takes months for me to formulate a painting in my head, and like sediments, they kind of settle down, and the paintings become intersections of all these ideas. And once I see them, then I start painting this idea again of staging and still life is something that I've been interested in. A lot of my work looks like sculpture and looks like it's been set up. And the paintings these paintings, this one, actually not this one. This is a little sculpture that I actually built in the studio. And with cardboard and tape. And from that sculpture, I depicted it, like from looking at it, like a still life, put it into this context. And so in a way, very much kind of thinking about, they're very sort of painting notions, like basic notions of painting, the background, the foreground, and kind of dealing with those very basic notions. But sculpture is something that I've been interested in, and so I, in a way, like kind of trying to stretch the medium of painting into different kind of, I mean, it's all tricks, it's all illusions, but to suggest more three-dimensionality, which is the 3D, the 3Dification of the world right now with cinema is something that I just made some pieces about that recently, and it's pretty. I'll come to it. It's so here's another aspect of my work. This is a piece from 2003. This was also part of the museum show in Montreal, and that was the oldest piece in the show. And I guess I put this piece in because it expresses also my interest in showing art and cultural history and how we do that and what is art and the stage we bring to it and the mechanism around showing art but promoting art and this phenomenon and how we show other cultures in this painting is my dad had sent me a postcard of African Museum in Paris, and I made this piece, and I think so this is the Canadian Museum of Civilization, and it kind of, I like the similarities too, and again, I just made this before this was built, I think, but it just kind of shows this kind of, I feel what they're showing there is completely lost in this crazy, I mean, it's beautiful like picture, but it's problematic in a way, and so I just, and so yeah, it's sort of like, how do we show cultural history, and how do we consume it? And I was also thinking about my own education and what my historical references came from, and a lot of it had to do with abstract expressionism, and I had a teacher at Concordia who taught a lot about, he was of that generation, about abstract expressionism. So that became a part of my work and kind of thinking about and kind of digesting very much long after the fact this history that we kind of have to acknowledge as painters or as artists. So and so the image I was showing you about, well, I mean, I was interested in making this painting in a way the Pollock in the back, it was fun making, and I isolated in the back and made it look like a propaganda kind of banner. And the setup, these boxes are kind of set up like a camera would be set up right in front. And I wanted this kind of almost like hostage scene where two people are in front, there's the banner in the back, it's kind of clear, and it's like a direct shot, face on with what we believe in the back, and then these kind of two people, which in this case is like boxes that are standing in front. And so I made quite a few works about abstract expressionism and this era of painting that was quite very kind of macho, masculine, and a kind of a Cold War kind of reaction to the opposite of what the Soviet Union was, and so and I was thinking about, well, I was looking at films that Hans Namuth, you probably know these films, here's a photograph of Pollock painting the cigarette always, and these films. Pollock painting this. So this painting, I started making these kinds of also these machines, these devices that actually could be fabricated and would probably work. And thinking about recorded history, and so there's a film coming out of this kind of cassette kind of thing. Nothing's right here, and like this device that would kind of move and make paintings and make marks. And so you have, I wish I had a close-up, but you have like on this film you have Pollock painting, and it's sort of like pushing it kind of, I guess, right. And then on the other side, it's pornography, and it's the, what I was interested in putting those two things together is that there's a kind of perverse way of looking at painting in a way. It's a very macho. Actually, in that film, in Hans Namuth film, Namuth asks Pollock, when do you know when a painting is done? And his response is, when do you know when you're finished making love? Or having sex. So you know, making love. So it's this kind of really macho era of painting, and so these mechanisms I started making are kind of taking in aspects of history and putting them together to create an action, to make work, to make paintings, to make ideas. So here's this is another painting that I had done previously to that one, about also the Hans Namuth film, but kind of it's not as animated, and Jackson Pollock again. All these paintings are made from memory, so they're very kind of loosely based on things. So he paints on in that film. He paints on these kind of boarded like a deck of some sort in the middle of the field, and so I set up kind of the scene and tried to play with the different kind of elements of the film within this painting, to kind of recreating a certain action. And I was thinking a lot about the mechanics of things and this industry of making as well, and so there's some that go to the extreme where it's just this kind of these worlds of like painting makers or dispensers, or they're just these crazy images of like whirlwinds of things, and I've made paintings that make paintings that print magazines and in the same painting, and they write articles too, and it's sort of like this crazy machine that you caught on. I made paintings where it's a studio gallery, where it's this you know, it's this mechanism of showing art and making art.
So Etienne, are you making up these machines as you're painting?
No,
or are you actually making the physical
models?
Of
Yeah, I wasn't clear enough. I made sculptures in the studio for maybe 2 years.
Okay.
And I stopped doing that. They kind of look like sculptures now, but I don't make models anymore.
Right, okay.
And the images, the paintings, I usually see them quite clearly in my head.
In one of the earlier ones, you had made the sculpture.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering about that departure of just...
Yeah, no. And so the paintings, the way I started painting is that I see it quite clearly, so I don't make anything, but I see it in my head. And it's this kind of process where things are really fluid, mixed with references and art historical, and just like anybody's head, just
right.
kind of, you know. And I have notes that kind of start to, I start to isolate things here and there, and then basically an image forms, and I'm just, the painting is kind of bringing that murky thing to now, contemporary.
Okay.
So it's that dealing with historical references and this almost like rebellious act of just saying, no, not that, because history is such a rich history of knowledge, of brushstrokes, of everything, and it's kind of carving out this image that from way in my head to kind of know. But I have a good idea of the structure of the painting before I started. Here I was thinking about randomness, and so I kind of invented a kind of device to kind of make color field painting, which the rag at the bottom is kind of like this kind of dye. I mean, again, like a lot of subjects intersect, so I remember at that time there was oil spills and things like that too, so so things kind of blur into, subjects blur into each other, and the systems, how they work. Cigarettes have been an interest because I like this. I mean, like the films I was referencing. This idea of capturing time, of capturing a moment, history, is something I've been really trying to understand, and how we understand that period of time. And cigarettes are a kind of like a 7-minute kind of time period. You know, I don't smoke anymore, but it's also such an emblem of the painter in the studio. And well, I'll come back to this painting, but I want to show you. This is Clement Greenberg, this cigarette. They've become so almost like fetish photography, like sort of this such kind of emblematic of these men smoking their cigarettes. And there's Mark Rothko's cigarette there. This painting. And so this painting. Oh, this painting I made thinking about a map, and a map and almost like pins on the map, and kind of thinking about Vancouver too, with the mountain in the back. Like the map is folded into a triangle, and so I just remember being in my studio, kind of imagining this person making this thing in their basement or something, and thinking about downtown Vancouver, and I had a studio in the downtown east side. Cigarettes are like around that neighborhood. It's like they're like money. It's like you want a sandwich? Two cigarettes, or like things like that. So they were just like things that were constant there, and I don't know. I probably was trying to stop smoking for the 10th time or something. And so yeah, it becomes almost like a war map, and but accumulated time. And the studio is something that that works also with this kind of artist, modernist artist, kind of working in the studio and smoking, and kind of doing different compositions with that, and isolating subjects and blowing up subjects. So this piece of glass, this pane of glass is you've probably seen them on the back of mini or vans, old vans. They sometimes use flexible acrylic kind of magnifying glass, and so the subject or the invented person there, which is just a bucket and a cigarette smoking, is blown up in the studio. Here's Francis Bacon's studio. I mean, the studio is something interesting. I mean, it's so, for me, it's so contemporary. Like, it's so now. I bring things from everywhere, and it's kind of got this this accumulation in corners, and things move, and everything kind of recalls something in action, and you spend a lot of time in the studio, and in a way my interest in archaeology and it's kind of how I behave in the studio, where things move but they gather up too, and history is everywhere. And this, I mean, partly why I build the sculpture, I build the paintings with detritus I find in the studio and make them look like other things. But it's almost just these pieces of language and textures that you put together to create an image. Here's Brancusi's studio. He had a relationship with more like blurring between the studio and the museum. Placement was really important for him. And this painting the first painting I made in Los Angeles when I moved there contained box, or the studio, or the museum. I made this painting looking, after I went to the LACMA there, the museum, the county museum in Los Angeles, thinking about all these amazing paintings that are shipped out on the West Coast. And this amazing weather, and then these artworks that come from all over the world. And I started to think about also the history of California with recording history, because the history in the 60s and 70s is one of a lot of performance art and a lot of outside of the studio, but going against the studio practice and more into basically the social frame, where the frame for the artwork is the interaction and not object based. And so I started to kind of think about ideas around recording, and again it comes back to gathering knowledge. And so here's another one using light. A lot of light. I mean, moving to California, obviously, I had started working with light in Montreal, but a lot more when I went to Los Angeles. It was the light there is pretty intense, and of course the whole industry of filmmaking there is such a huge influence. It's such a, not an influence, but it's a huge. Well, I mean, it's such a huge. You can't go around that. That's where filmmaking kind of gets made. Like most of the bulk of the filmmaking for American, for North American, worldwide public. So again, these kind of mechanisms of projecting, and there's another one, 2010 studio recording. So setting up this kind of scene of letting light through, very much based on the camera obscura or the camera lucida, old kind of machines of sort of contemporary camera, and just kind of imagining letting light in. The middle part would be this mess of the studio. I mean, again, this is stuff that sometimes lies in the studio, but it's imagined. I didn't set it up or anything, and then the shadow is casted on the film that's being made as time goes by. Here's a picture of the camera lucida. I just like to look at this. Pretty interesting. So artists used to use these devices to make images. Again, this device of recording and projecting. This painting also is based on the mechanism of the camera, where light comes in on the left side, RIP, this one, rest in pain. And so I just kind of imagine this device where the light comes in on the left side, goes through a history, and it's a history of painting in this case. So I was kind of thinking about how light has been used, and so the last painting on the right side is a Fra Angelico. You've probably seen these paintings where light goes through buildings and all that, and somebody gets illuminated, or like a divine kind of light comes in, and so the light kind of shoots out on the other side, but it's been inverted. This painting is a similar. I've been interested in because of my interest in recording and the camera. I've been interested in looking at light in painting and the history of parting clouds and light shining through. And this painting came from an experience I had. I had a residency at a museum last year in Ireland for the summer, 2 months, and this kind of parting of the clouds and light shining through happens almost daily there, which is pretty incredible. And I was thinking, this is the first. I made a different version of this painting when I was in Ireland, but it's similar to this one. And so my idea was to capture, to make meteorological models, and just try and make little models that kind of would contain these almost like experiments. And they're complete fictional experiments, and they don't prove anything, but they allude to a history of painting and a history of working with light. And this painting was the trigger for the show that was at Equinox that just ended. And I'll show you. I think I have a picture of the installation of the show. And so what I did with this show is I took scientific experiments but changed the components of the experiments. So I didn't put, maybe I should talk about that because I didn't bring pictures of it. But, well, I have another one here. So thinking about these experiments with light and color and how color fades over time, and setting up this painting where you have different, almost like a print, and you have different editions of an image, and rays shining through a piece of paper, and the disintegration of an image. And kind of, I was interested in looking at how in history, the more we look at certain pictures, the more they get destroyed because light is on them. And throughout history, it's been that way, where probably the best artwork has been destroyed because it probably was threatening to other cultures. So that was the first thing you went at when you were, perhaps, when you were invading somebody. So these kinds of ideas are kind of, so the show functions that way, where the experiments become vehicles or channels to different histories. And so the system is hijacked for something else. This one is part of the show as well at Equinox. Shows a lot about light, and it's a lot about matter, and kind of thinking about both. So in this case, the light becomes almost like sticks that are kind of piercing through an image. That you can't see it very well, but there's an image on the first image at the bottom of a man or somebody on a horse and a house in the background. You can kind of see the house clearer when you go up top. It's kind of tilted on its side. And I come back to the dig, archaeological digs, and a bad image because it's just a snapshot, because I quickly photographed it before I left. I made it in Ireland as well. And it's 12 feet by 9 feet high. So I wanted to think about cultural history, cultural debris, and kind of digging through things and clearing spaces, where it becomes more about the frame than the objects. The objects are there to delimit these, and you can't see it very well, but those squares that are left empty in the painting are, they're quite translucent, and they have this kind of pinkish red, and they're quite vibrant. It's the only thinness also in the painting, so they have the brightest value to the whole painting. And I wanted to set it up like those squares look like film stills, like 35 millimeter kind of serial film, so squares after square, and just kind of lined up. That's how a film used to be edited, lining up the film on the table. So this is just kind of the background of how I was thinking about making this image. And but everything is doubled, and so you're almost kind of, when you look at the painting, it's kind of hard to focus, and it's very slippery. So you're always trying to adjusting. It's like you're not wearing the right glasses. And so again, this 3D, I'm coming back to this kind of, I'm interested in this 3D thing. It's a strange thing to really want to recreate real things, but it's this moment where I'm interested in that moment because what happens in your head, because you're presented with two things that don't make sense, and the brain kind of makes sense of it. They invent a third image, which creates this 3D effect. And I think as for painting, it's interesting. I mean, we have a history of that too. I mean, you put yellow and blue side by side and it's green. I mean, there's sort of this leading up to this 3D thing that is now more and more filmmakers really want to use this technology. But I wanted to play with that, and so I made this painting. At the moment, there's a show also. I have a show at the Surrey Art Gallery, which is 7 paintings. I have installation shots of this show. Will be coming up, and this is another 12-foot by 9-foot painting, and this painting is in the show as well in Surrey, and it's quite a large show. It's a beautiful room. Well, maybe I'll show you the installation shot. This is one part of the room. I don't have every part. I brought only 1, 2, 3 pieces of it. Here's the piece. And so, yeah, so this piece I made also using this kind of doubling where I made the whole painting. They're kind of like, it's kind of like historical debris where it's almost like a garbage pile or a city that's been uncovered, and water went through and then receded after, and it's just kind of the remnants of that. So I made the whole painting, and every single object in this painting has its own double in transparency. So again, it's really hard to focus on the image. And the only thing that you can focus on are these kind of atomic kind of slides that you kind of have the impression that are digging in or trying to kind of analyze what's underneath. And they create these kind of bridges over the image, the painting. So you're kind of skipping, but everything else is really murky. I mean, feeling of sort of like Roman, Greek, Egyptian kind of shapes around, like old cultures, or like this sort of remnants of old cultures.
So what would happen if people put on 3D glasses? Is this effect coming?
Even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not made. It could be made, but I'm not. I wasn't really looking for that. I was looking for not having the glasses on, and kind of dealing with this. Because I'm not. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, I saw Avatar. It's an interesting experience, but I was more interested in talking about that than replicating it. And maybe I'm just not ready to. Maybe I'm not ready to make a 3D painting with in a way that I could think would expand on the subject, perhaps.
It also seems that an important subject matter for you is paint.
Yeah.
Like what are the physical limitations of paint?
Yeah.
And so interesting, starting talking about Pollock and the abstract expressionists, because they were really talking about that too. What can paint do? And so all the way through, there's that sense. And seeing your paintings, for people who haven't seen the paintings, you get that physicality of really thick paint and then really thin. So that's what I see a lot.
I mean, there's all the ideas, but that's the thing, is when I make the paintings, it's all about painting as well. So it's always kind of this back and forth between language ideas and painting, and the history of painting, and the different kind of problems that painting has and negotiation between abstraction, representation, between kind of making an image. It's like every paint stroke has a history, and you kind of either acknowledge it or not, or most of the time I think I'm pretty much not knowing that, but it's such a rich history. I'm almost done here. I just thought I'd show you some works that are in progress in the studio. The nest. This is a show. That's the show I'm working on for Ireland. So this is one of the pieces. Well, it's the one that's hung on this weird piece of wood.
You have such pristine floors.
Yeah, I had just moved in.
Oh.
They're like 1 month now, and they're just, I subletted this studio for the summer from this photographer.
Oh, I see.
And it's a pristine studio, and it's really bad now already.
I was worried.
It's okay, I'll just paint it. This is the start of another painting. So this show is for Ireland, and I'm kind of fictionalizing. I don't know if this piece is done yet, but kind of fictionalizing. I was interested in Ireland because of the landscape that is quite incredible, and the history is so available. And you just walk in a field and you have like monuments of like 5,000 years old just there that you just kind of look through almost, like, and then churches from the 13th century that are just kind of left there, but everything's there. It's so tactile. It's still very much sort of unprotected, I guess, but it has such a richer way of experiencing things. I mean, looking at artifacts now, and looking at art, and you can't touch. You just can't touch. And that tactile, that thing about materials is not very, it's not present anymore. And that's the interesting part about in Ireland, is that it's still there. There's so much out there, and I was interested in the Romans have never kind of settled there. There was trading, but they never settled. So it's very different historically. Just to consider that, I wanted to make this kind of strange this kind of Roman statue kind of wheel, and just, I don't know, that just inventing a kind of a strange history almost. And so the show has to do a lot with archaeology, and this is another painting I'm not sure if it's going to be part of the show then. And here's one picture of the show at Equinox. So if there's any questions.
Hey, I'm a big fan of your work. I just wanted to, when people, sometimes they paint from memory, there's this usually like a illustrative or contrived quality to it. Sometimes it's just outline, but you seem to have this lucidity of recall. Is there possibility of advice?
I don't know. I just kind of fake it. I make it look plausible enough.
So is your background in still life painting? Like, did you practice observing or no?
Well, yeah, but just like anybody in school. I wasn't particularly good or anything like that either, but I don't know, I think it just saved me time.
And I think it's interesting to say you just make it plausible enough.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of times people think when they're painting you have to make it exact, but it just has to be enough because our imagination can fill in.
Yeah, you fill in the rest.
You just make it
move on,
convincing.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the paintings work where it's sort of like you kind of gather information, you slowly kind of understand maybe the parameters of things and how they function and how they're placed, and then you start to maybe get into, okay, now I get it, I'm sort of familiar with this kind of weather or something like that, and then you kind of figure things out after that. It's kind of how I think about the work. So, but there's been pieces where I put a lot of details, but it just kind of becomes really about painting, about just manipulation. Lots of trial and error. Yeah, and then you make it kind of plausible, real enough.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Okay. Do you feel connected at all to surrealism? You mentioned constructivism. You mentioned suprematism. You mentioned abstract expressionism.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was interesting that surrealism didn't really come up because, and maybe not so much in terms of the subject matter, but your thought process, this idea of free association, when you're doing the painting, and then also when viewers are looking at them, seemed quite important.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you felt personally connected to that history as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same, very similar system of thinking, definitely. But I don't. I see them as real things though, because I see them. Most of the paintings could be built, and I have built some out of from a painting to a sculpture.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes it different than surrealism, but maybe in the thinking. I don't know.
Do you know David Altman's work at all?
Yeah.
Do you feel connected to that? I'm curious.
Yeah.
That was something
Yeah,
while I was looking at this, I was putting you next to him in a weird way.
Definitely, yeah. His use of form and space and the way the stories kind of go in different ways.
Yeah, I
It's
see
a
that.
world.
pieces oil or acrylic? Or
They're all oil. Yeah.
Well, a lot of your images seem to be like a progression from start to finish, kind of like through a lens almost. Do you have any images that are more kind of static that don't really tell a story so much, but are just an image for the sake of being an image? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I like that they are stories. That it's kind of like this is how it's seen. This is kind of how it ends up. I think that makes better artwork versus it being just like, you know, well painted flower. I was just wondering if you had images like that as well. That weren't so much symbolic. Not that symbolic.
I don't know. I mean that's the thing is, I think for me there's always so much background because the images take so long to make, and I won't paint until I really thought about what this painting's about. I must put like a context to that image I'm going to put out there. But I think if someone doesn't know all that, they could have they could have that experience possibly. And some paintings are more static. Like I don't have a close-up image of it, but the second one on the right is a very static image, and it looks like a piece of rock with black paint on it.
Well, I like that most of them aren't static, I suppose.
Yeah.
So they can go longer.
So are you focusing only on painting, or do you still do some other kind of medium?
No, mostly, yeah, painting for sure. I do the odd kind of sculptures sometimes. I don't make many drawings. I'm making this kind of sculpture at the moment.
Out of what?
Collage, just paper
Mesh?
mulch, kind of just pulp with glue. And the project's not completely resolved, but it's like 10 by 10, and it's a weaved canvas, like woven with paper pulp. Anyway, it's a process. It's getting there.
And then what do you think on top of that?
Well, there's something else that goes on top. I need to see it first. First time I do that.
Is this like a model that you have to put into 3D so you can see?
No, it's a special project for collage, so yeah, and it's, yeah, I didn't want to make a collage, so I made this thing, and there's something else.
And another question.
Yeah.
You're very accomplished and successful in painting. How many paintings are unsuccessful? What do you do with those? Or not like the count, but you do still have unsuccessful paintings, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, I usually know when I look back, like 3-4 years. Because all the paintings get eventually finished. But even though they can change quite a bit, because some of them get left behind for like years.
And then you go back to them.
I go back to them, and sometimes an aspect wasn't resolved or something like that. Yeah, to kind of push it to that next level.
So nothing gets burned or thrown on.
Not much, no. Only because you can always repaint. So, yeah.
Etienne, talk a lot about an interest in cultures and different culture and things like that. I was reading an old article on your work from Canadian art, and you, at that time, or in that article, were talking a lot about the French-English language and how so much of all of your training, your formal training is in English. And in the article, you made some mention about the fact that you only paint in English. And I thought that was really interesting. And I'm just wondering, as someone from Quebecois in LA, do you paint in French anymore? Or not anymore, but now, or Has that changed at all? Is it still all painting in English?
Yeah, it's
Which I thought was interesting, because you know text in your paintings. So I just thought that was, especially because tonight you're talking so much about different cultures and understanding things and unearthing stuff, and then having read that article recently.
Yeah, no, it's all English. It's just,
What would happen if you painted in French?
yeah, I don't know. I wonder if I'd recall my education. I don't know.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
What are the different sizes of these paintings, and what led you to choice of sizes?
The first four there are 48 inches high by 42. I have 3 sizes. It's like that size. The one at the back is 74 by 66, and I have 9 feet by 12 feet. I've sort of recently just kind of, okay, this works for me. The small ones, 48 by 42. They're kind of, I think of them as like I think of little models. They're kind of really tight kind of ideas that are squeezed into this frame, and they're kind of singular ideas usually. Single things are happening, single actions, and the medium-sized ones are sort of, there's more of a context. There's more of a scene. I have a lot more space to kind of create a background for this idea, or the central theme of the painting. And then the really large ones usually have to do with landscape, like a lot of space. And even though all these paintings really play around with scale, you still have that look. I mean, cloud painting, the cloud painting there is, well, computer's thinking of it. Yeah. The cloud painting, I don't know what that is. Is, you know, you kind of, oh, I wonder what happened. Anyways, the cloud painting kind of has a strange scale. Let's get it back again. It has a strange scale, but you still have the feeling that it's contained and that it's central. What is it? Anyways. It's slideshow.
Yeah, go to slideshow. At the very top.
Yeah, so that's.
On campus?
Yeah, most of them are canvas. Recently I just started working on them, just because the tube is different and I liked it.
Etienne, if I'm looking over your shoulder, I'm seeing the difference in saturation between images here and what's projected. Which one would you say is more accurate?
The screen, yeah.
That screen, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. It's floods like that.
It's stronger, shorter.
Yeah. Yeah, and the resolution is slightly lost with the projection.
So, you seem to have such a deep connection to places, sort of their history, their language, their sort of intellectual ideas. Do you find that you seek different places to paint because of the
an idea or a feeling that you have, or do you have those feelings wherever you go and wherever you paint?
Yeah, I think it's part of me, because even like I moved a lot in Vancouver, and it's always thoughts are different. I don't have to move that far to kind of start. I don't know. I just find it interesting how slightly different things can mean so much in different areas or in a different context. And it's sort of like how you navigate all that. You kind of, you're always changing, but everything's changing too. But when you change quickly to somewhere else, it's sort of like you're bringing a lot with you that has nothing to do, but kind of. So moving around is definitely sort of kind of shocks you, I think. And those are like the sort of the big images come to you, but then the details start to come out, I think, when you start spending time somewhere too.
And do you always approach a place from its history, like Los Angeles from film, or Ireland from ruins, or do you find yourself sort of moving back and digging deeper in another place to find the ideas that inspire you?
Well, I think I used to move a lot faster through things, and I still do. I'm kind of a bit like have an attention deficit in a way where I kind of go everywhere all the time. But I think I've noticed that more and more I'm kind of stopping and actually moving, more and more interested in way earlier history, like kind of medieval and way back. Just kind of stopping time a lot more, and trying to stay still a bit.
What value do you see in just engaging with interesting things? What's your motivation, or are there other values attached to it? Because it seems like your subject matter is like interesting things and bringing those all together.
Yeah. I think they're just interesting, I think, to me. And that's kind of what I paint about. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I just, I'm noticing more and more that, especially when I start to go through my work, there's definitely themes kind of that I come back to.
Like the digging area?
Yeah, digging is one, yeah. So it's kind of.
Well, that's a good note to end with, because that's the best advice you could give to anybody, is to paint things that they're interested in.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.